So answers are commodities, questions are not. We were building that capability, and when COVID hit, the perfect storm. We could really leverage all the new capabilities.
Jay Koganti, Vice President of Supply Chain Center of Excellence at the Estée Lauder Companies. With over 24 years of experience pioneering digital transformation, resilient strategies, AI-driven innovations, and consumer goods supply chains.
Stay curious, especially technologies, the pace of technology, and the whole world, the uncertainty. I think you really need to stay curious.
Welcome to Supply Chain Optimizers, the show that uncovers the controversial strategies and candid stories of innovators and disruptors from some of the world's largest supply chain operations. Let's cut through the noise and optimize your logistics and supply chain, one bold idea at a time. So, welcome to Supply Chain Optimizers. I'm Diego Solorzano, and today it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Jay Koganti, Vice President of Supply Chain Center of Excellence at the Estée Lauder Companies. With over 24 years of experience pioneering digital transformation, resilient strategies, AI-driven innovations, and consumer goods supply chains, Jay has been instrumental in shaping next-generation planning platforms and embedding sustainability at scale. Jay, welcome to the show. So excited to have you on.
Thank you, Diego. Yeah, appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, looking forward to it.
So Jay, you've spent over 2 decades in supply chain leadership across a bunch of different roles. 17 years almost at Estée Lauder. What key experiences shaped your passion for digital transformation?
Yeah, it's many things. I think one, when it comes to supply chain, right? It's excitement around opportunities for the growth, and transformation itself is very challenging, right? Supply chain is very complex. I always keep reminding people it's globally right now more than 400 million people works in supply chain, right? So it's a large endeavor, and also it drives a lot of global commerce, right? It's integrated. So I think the variety of experiences for myself, working in different countries, different cultures, and different process complexities, that's exciting for me, right? A lot of different experiences bringing together really makes a big difference in the world. Yeah.
So your background spans pretty much, the works across supply chain distribution, IBP, right? Integrated business planning, analytics, everything pretty much, right? How has this breadth shaped your holistic view of supply chain excellence? How has this helped you be a better supply chain excellence leader?
Yeah, I think supply chain is always about both the breadth and depth, right? So I think, you could have a deep expertise in one area, but, if you don't understand the breadth of the supply chain, the interdependencies, how they connected, then you miss the point, right? So I think for me, fortunately, I worked in a different, functions or process areas within the supply chain. I worked in the industry, went into consulting, advisory, then went back to industry. So it's kind of, it really helped me to grow what they call T-shaped skills, right? Go deep, come out, go broad, right? And also always I go back to, a lot of supply chain transformation is always about going back to the first principles or guiding principles, right? So what is, why we're doing, what we're doing, then how follows to it. So, it's been, blessing in terms of knowing both deep trenches as well as a broader impact we could influence at enterprise level, at the country and level as well, right? So it's been, I think, a couple of areas I won't really talk about when it comes to the breadth of the supply chain, right? One is, I think, the lot of process transformation work is about understanding the context, right? And making those strategic pivots. Also, really appreciating, what is the shared purpose, right? That could bring people together and creating that excitement, momentum. So that's where I think, having that broader context will always help you to navigate the transformation, projects.
It's a pretty interesting take, and how much of any successful project is really about this shared purpose, excitement, momentum. How do you navigate this, right? Have you maybe give us one or two examples about things that have gone well for you in your career in terms of shared purpose, excitement, momentum? And maybe would love one example of things when it hasn't go your way, right? When it hasn't gone well.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, really the supply chain transformation is all about, a lot of time people tend to navigate to my problem, today's problem, right? We call it ankle biters, right? I mean, these are the things really, impediments, right? Really, challenging areas. But again, transformation is more than that, right? It can be just solving today's problem. It also needs to be, future proof. It's also looking forward. So a lot of times, my experience, right, you have to handle both, right? You can ignore the current realities of today's challenges, jump to the, 2 years, 3 years, what's the future, right? You have to solve both. I think right balancing, right, addressing the challenges as well as looking forward and putting yourself 3, 4, 5 years out there and looking into the future. That makes a big difference in terms of how to go about it. A couple of examples I want to give. I think when a lot of people talk about the COVID, right, post COVID, pre COVID, right. So one of the biggest issue in COVID time, everyone realized, resilience, right? So with a lot of volatility, in a marketplace, how companies struggle with the resiliency, whether it's a, supply availability or a constant change of the demand patterns and everything, right? So the companies who really succeeded are really they prepared even before the COVID, right? They really thought about, even though they don't know it's a COVID is going to be there, that, one of the work we did in the, pre-COVID, we realized when we built the big enterprise, planning system, over years, we felt the lack of resilience in the system, right? It's very the fixed way of operating. Then we started working on how to build a more agile way of doing the planning, process. And we were building that capability. And when COVID hit, the perfect storm, right? I mean, we could really leverage all the new capabilities, whether it's a scenario planning, right? Doing, different ways of planning with different roles, right? Dividing planning by different horizons, like a short term, medium, long. So some of those concepts we just applied or built when COVID hit, really we could see the impact of that, right? So that was very powerful way to realize.
Now you talk a lot about your 2 day problem, right? And you've publicly expressed that you advocate for a 3 year strategic horizon time of supply chain. Can you unpack why 3 years and what types of decision making and investment can one make in that time horizon?
So I think the horizon is a very important concept, right? A lot of supply chain challenges today, right, is comes from people not focusing beyond current quarter or current year, right? Because that's also the whole environment, right? There's a lot of volatility, fluidity in a global markets, right? Plus, even recent time a lot of tariffs and all those creates a lot of amplified noise in the supply chain. So the horizon concept is, I mean, again, it's nothing new, right? I mean, historically it's always there, but but never emphasized enough. So the concept of short, medium, long is very important, right? So when you look into 3 year horizon, I mean, it could be 5 years. If some industries, you need to see the 5 years ahead. Some could be less. The concept is when you manage your longer horizon very effectively, right? Then you can manage your medium horizon very well. That means your short term horizon you're prepared well, right? That's a basic building blocks of the three horizon concept. Also, there is a one important aspect. Bill Sharpe, this a foresight guru. He talked about also managing horizons in a three constructs, right? One construct is the first horizon is really looking into today, while keeping eye on the transformation, right? But you have to solve for today's problem. And if you don't do it well, people ignore it, right? Because the today's problems is to be solved. Then the middle one is a bridge horizon, right? Then you're really thinking about innovation, disruptive ways of doing it, completely different ways of doing, right? It's a bridge between today's reality to the future. The third horizon is actually really where you really fully realize where you want to be, right? So it is also nicely aligns with this long horizon or 3 year horizon concept.
How does maybe if you can quote like a good example to the to our audience, right? Where you've seen this three time horizon concept come into play. Very yeah. Thank you.
Plus, what we did, one of the big project we did for Estée Lauder is, I think when you look at any IBP, we realized, it's again, as 6, 7 years back, a lot of our IBP meetings are resolving around, today, right? Where is my product? Where is my how I'm closing my current quarter, right? Where is my service level? So a lot of times IBP is navigating to today's problem versus its intended purpose of looking, mid to long range, right? So one of the things we found, if the same people are responsible for all 3 horizons, then naturally you are pressured to look at today. You don't care about what's going to happen in a few months down the line, a few years down the line, right? So one of the big pivot we did is operating model wise, we started dividing the roles, right? So giving a very specific focus. There is certain roles within the enterprise. We want them to really short-term focused. They're not worried about, few months down the line, a few years, right? Then there is a set of people, their real goal and objective is a longer horizon. They're looking out, they're not doing any today's firefighting, right? That's not their responsibility. They're looking at, 2, 3 year out in terms of, what are the capacities, what capabilities we need to build, right? So how the demand is evolving, it's a little bit longer horizon. So and marrying both, right, both concepts together is very powerful way to navigate. And it was very effective during COVID time. We saw it having those differentiated roles, managing different horizons.
Now switching gears a little bit, you are the BP of Supply Chain Center of Excellence as the Estée Lauder Companies. For the layman, how do you define your role?
Yeah, it's a COE. A lot of COE roles are about the capability transformation, right? So I work at many levels, right? I mean, this is an interesting part of the job, right? I'm deep into the process. Also, I'm very well versed with the technologies, right? So I have to keep an eye on marketplace. What are the emerging technologies and how they're shaping, the processes, etc. Also, you need to be very intimate with the operating model, right? The organization structure, change management, operating model. It's kind of in a typically, bringing all those 3 things, people, process, technology, right? How you bring them together is, typically COE roles. I mean, that's to me, that's very fulfilling in a way, So you get the ringside view of, all aspects of a enterprise and supply chain in specific in terms of all the nuts and bolts of how things are changing and evolving. Yeah.
You've been at it for roughly 10 years, right?
Yeah.
Have you seen the role change itself much in these last 10 years?
Yeah, it is getting a little more, tech heavy. I mean, definitely, right? So what happening is, the lot of process driven transformation used to happen, right? You take any process, you do the value engineering, you re-engineer the process. That used to be the way. Now it's a lot of transformations are tech enabled process transformation, right? They're using the new technology, especially with AI, machine learning, AGI coming into the play. So you're kind of bypassing a traditional process, transformation. You're leapfrogging into technology-enabled process transformation. That means you need to be well versed with all the technologies as well.
And how does a COE measure its effectiveness? How does an organization know if its supply chain center of excellence is actually making an impact?
Yeah, I think supply chain center of excellence is like innovation arm for a supply chain, right? So just like any enterprise, you have an R&D function. SDOE is a R&D function for supply chain. The measurement is how many breakthrough innovations you're doing in supply chain, right? It's whether it's a process KPIs is a good way to measure, right? How you're improving process KPIs, cost, or specifically cost to serve, right? All the key metrics, what are the new initiatives you're bringing in and what we are optimizing, how we are optimizing, right? That's the way we measure it. So, and also I think the way we always work is kind of there's a performance focus, there's also transformation focus. Right? They're happening simultaneously, right? Yeah.
You are also a very active keynote speaker. I saw some of your chats and your keynotes. A recent one on DPW. You used a Greek history analogy, right, to illustrate AI's role in supply chains. And since you brought up the mention of machine learning and AI, I wanted to ask you about this, right? What was the central message you wanted your leaders to take away? And maybe if you can give us the Greek history analogy for, the listeners here in the show.
Yeah, that was very interesting. So I think after all these years, I'm finding a lot of kinship with foresighters, right? I mean, especially these times, with so much of uncertainty in business in general, I feel what missing in enterprises, a lot of enterprises is lack of foresight function, right? Foresight not just as a marketing function, it could be applied in any function, right? Your supply chain, innovation, many places. The example I was giving, it's a multi-layered example. So I think if you anyone with interest in the history, right, the Oracle of Delphi, right? It's a so basically this is a Battle of Salamis. I think it's 450 or 80 BC, right? The Persian army, is at the in the process of invading Athens, right? So they went to Oracle to seek the advice. So the Oracle very interestingly, gives three very cryptic messages. Right. The first message is, hey, there will be wooden walls that could be unconquered. Right. Then flee the city. Right. So run away from city. Then the third one is, many young men will die, near the island of Salamis. Then the whole Athenians, they got shocked. You could interpret that anyway, right? So they shocked. They said, we're going to lose the war, right? Then there is this old, old man, with a lot of wisdom. Themistocles, his name, right? He's a philosopher, in Athens. He interpreted rightly. What he said is, the wooden wall means actually not a wall, it's a ship, right? So what that really means, you don't fight the war at the city, you actually fight the war using the naval ships, right? So I think that interpretation kind of, saved Athens because they won the war, right? So there's three things I was really making point out there. So with artificial general intelligence, getting an answer is very easy now, right? You can ask any question, you get an answer, right? So I think it depends on how you ask question, how clearly, deliberately you ask question that makes a huge difference, right? So answers are commodities, questions are not, right? Yeah, that's one. Then I would say you get a lot of different. No answer is singular. When you look at any AGI, you get a lot of indeterministic plural answers, multiple answers, right? So the third one is you still need the human agency to interpret the answer. So Athenians would have really failed if they don't have someone with experience and wisdom who could interpret the answer, right? So you could apply all three into AI age, right? So you need that wisdom. You need to know what the questions to ask, right? Also be prepared to, interpret the answers in a many different ways.
Yeah, it's something that I talk a lot about is in an age, right, in AI where building is easier, where, as you mentioned, the value of asking a question is basically zero, right? The skill to possess is really the diagnostic skill, right? What is the right question? How can I identify the real problem to go after, and how can I, dedicate my time and resources to that problem? Um, because yeah, to follow up with a Greek history analogy, right? Famously, the other oracle, Cassandra, right, have the gift of foresight, but the doom that no one believed her, right? So maybe I'm overplaying the analogy here, but how do companies avoid Cassandras, right? Like, oh, here's a foresight, but yeah, we cannot trust it.
No, I think that's a big dichotomy, right? I mean, the foresight is a very, you know, complex area, but also a very emerging area, right? Companies are realizing now, right, having that chops in foresight in terms of, really understanding not as a prediction mechanism, but as for a mechanism for preparing yourself, right? So I think the way to think about foresight is, what are the alternatives? What are the optionalities, right? What are the different ways to, anticipate a problem, right? How to mitigate it and how to react to it. So that you need to have a very deliberate thinking process, right? Otherwise, most of the time, right, companies are reactionary mode, right? We call it diving catches, right? And a lot of people get their clothes, when you do the diving catches, but the real success of an enterprise sits on how you're able to see ahead, prepare, right? So that's different. That's what makes a big difference for a very successful companies, right? And short-term focused companies.
Yeah, just reiterated that concept if I understood it correctly, because it's one of the most interesting things I've heard, right? You have the foresight mostly to prepare, not really to react. Is that what you're saying?
So I think it's the preparedness comes from the foresight, right? It's not. I mean, it's not about predicting, right? I don't see much value in how good your of predictive accuracy. That doesn't matter to me, right? But you're really going through understanding what are the different possibilities, right? And preparing for it mentally, physically, putting the right buffers, right? So that's probably the biggest opportunity for enterprises putting a foresight, groups. Yeah.
Very, very interesting. Just preparing for the different possibilities, not really the prediction itself, because the prediction
Yeah.
itself might not be as valuable.
Never be accurate, right? I mean, yeah.
Never be accurate, correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, I have to ask, right? Like in preparing for different scenarios, there's a bunch of trade offs, right? Like I can think of a few examples where, oh, something could happen. Let's go very dramatic. COVID could hit again. Therefore, maybe I have to have all the microchip inventory available, right? Are you talking really about that? Or how does one prepare, and what are the trade offs there to preparing if you have better foresight?
So I think there's a whole science of foresight, right? I mean, so the way to really think about is, uh, you know, again, you had to bring the concept of horizons, right? I mean, everything is not going to happen tomorrow or today, right? So it's about thinking in horizons, thinking also a lot of signals, right? So what are the different signals? There is a strong signals, there's a weak signals, right? So always I give this example. Even the biggest trend happening in market might have been a weak signal, few months back or few years back, right? So how do you understand those weak signals and see which weak signal could become a strong signal, right? Which could become a trend. So I think in terms of understanding the signals, understanding the different scenarios in a horizons, right? You always think what could be the scenario in a 3-month horizon, 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, right? Different. They're also keeping a close eye on different policies, macroeconomic indicators, right? Consumer sentiment. So, I mean, this is not a one stream, right? It's looking at the multiple streams, contextualizing it, right? And then narrowing down to 2 or 3 scenarios. And if you try to do too many scenarios, you are, there is analysis paralysis. You're stuck there, right? So you have to pick the 3 top scenarios. Then you want to see how you're prepared as an enterprise to react to that, right? So then you want to check, your infrastructure, your capabilities, your capital. Are we, positioned to address, some of these, contingencies, right? That's how to think about it. So we do that. I mean, a lot of companies do it in a more of a strategic, yearly process that everyone forgets about it. But now I think the point here I want to stress upon is there's an opportunity to do it much more faster, more frequently. That's where that will make a big difference for the enterprises.
We could spend, yeah, hours and hours talking about, enterprise foresight. I do want to touch though on a couple other things that you continuously, or at least in the last couple months, have posted about. One of them I have to ask is about AI agents, right? Have you seen AI agents actually make an impact in the enterprise, in supply chain? In what specific domains, and how have you seen this play out in real life?
Yeah, I think AI agents, the way I would put a very simple terms, right? I mean, you are familiar with the bots, right? I mean, we use the chatbots and different bots. It's a next version, but also it got some inbuilt intelligence coming from the large language models, right? So this area is definitely fascinating to me, and it's really catching up pretty fast, right? For 2 reasons. One is, when you use artificial general intelligence, right? In any large language model, you ask a question, you get an answer. It's all it's not deterministic. It's kind of, different. The answer is, there's a lot of ambiguity built into it, right? There's no specificity. What agents really does is it automates that, right? It's a very precise, specific action, and you could set a rule book, right? And this is how they should react to these scenarios, and they also, backed by, this AGI related, technology as well. So it's a good combination of, uh, AGI with, the deterministic, right, non-deterministic, and agents with very deterministic approach for executing it. So a couple of examples, right? Procurement is doing a lot in this space, right? They're automating, there's a procurement agents automating, right from the contracts, pricing negotiations, right? Planning is doing a lot of work. For example, you look at your inventory exceptions, and you want to do inventory deploy different ways. You don't need any human intervention, or agents can do it, right? I think this is very powerful area, evolving very fast in the space. Yeah.
The other thing you also mentioned quite a bit is about ESG goals, right? And integrating those into large scale supply chain transformation programs. How do you go about setting those goals, implementing them, and then following through and measuring them?
Yes, I think the underlying context, always, I pitch for this, the 8 global supply chains contribute to almost 50% of the greenhouse gases, right? We are one of the biggest contributors, right? Within the supply chain, we have a lot of scope in terms of, ESG goals, sustainability in general, right? It could, many aspects of it, you could do better than what we do today, right? So I think there is a two points I want to make. One is AI with a specific to carbon intelligence, right? That could be very powerful ways to really look deep into sustainability metrics, right? How to really design and operate supply chains with the sustainability mindset. Okay. Whether it is going to be designing product packaging, right? Looking at your, the ingredients, sourcing impact, right? Where you're procuring, right? Transparency in terms of, how your materials are flowing, right? Even engineering, design, many areas. And also you could think, scope 3 is one of the biggest challenge in supply chain, right? So you could now, using some of this, AI technology agents, you can go deep into supply chain, your supplier network, and look at, what is the scope three, emissions to track it, right? So I think there's a big powerful opportunity using AI for the ESG purposes now. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated by how different technologies can be used to provide like a mixture of results, right? And an approach of AI to some ESG right goals, scope three, as you mentioned. Actually, by the way, can you do what is scope three for our audience?
Yeah, so I think if you look at, the if you want to track your emissions, right? One is the emissions you can control within your enterprise. Very simple, right? Scope one, your energy, water, right? All of this, which you can directly control. Scope two is your suppliers, right? So you want to understand, when suppliers send you a certain product material, so what is the emission behind it? How many greenhouse, how much of greenhouse gases you're generating? How much of the fuel consumption, all those details. Then scope three is your supplier. Now you think you have hundreds of suppliers, they might be backed by thousands of suppliers behind. You don't have any visibility to that, right? So the scope three is going into the full network, really understanding, right? What is the carbon impact on your product coming from your suppliers, right? Which is a very hard challenge. Imagine you could be working with a mom and pop, small supplier versus a multi-billion, big suppliers. How do you really track across the network, right? So that you really understand the impact of products you're making for your enterprise.
Well, you kind of hinted at the question: how do you do it?
That's a hard challenge, right? So a lot of enterprises struggle with scope two itself because you have to influence, you build a network with those suppliers, right? But then you want to go beyond your scope two, scope three is next to impossible, very hard to do. But with the AI agentic technologies, right? I mean, it's not like you have to go and chase each supplier, right? The ways you could do a lot of automation, right? And also you can make some, interpretation. You don't need to have a perfect answer, right? So you can compare, contrast. If this is the, ingredient I'm getting from my supplier, what could be the potential carbon emission coming from it, right? So you can make some, extrapolation on that. So those are the things. It's humanly very challenging to do it if you're dealing with a large scale, the ESG mandates. But if you apply a smart, intelligent, agents, right, they could do that work for you, right? So that's where I'm saying it will become a little more easier with the AI technology. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Right. Again, the mixture of solutions to problems is where it gets interesting, right? Like maybe the mix of AI, some machine learning approach, or maybe some more Gen AI approach and some agent approach to different problems and optimization. There's a bunch of ways in which technology can help you solve challenges. And I think your whole point is, all right, if it becomes easy to have these types of answers, asking the right question is what ultimately one should strive for. How do you overcome these types of challenges? How does one, at least from your COE experience and perspective, how can you impact an organization to ask the right questions and overcome hurdles and get implementations done and tests and pilots? Anything you can share there on change management, basically?
To me, everything goes back to the first principle, right? So you have to ask, the why, right? I mean, why you're doing, right? What's the impact it's going to make for your enterprise, your function, and the country at large, right? I mean, you have to keep asking those questions, right? Again, you're not going to solve the world hunger in a day, but how do you really approach a problem? And also, it is a deep listening. To me, a lot of time. I mean, I've seen over years, there's one of the consulting partner I worked used to describe this, admiring the problems, right? A lot of companies, they don't really understand deeply the problem. They admire the problem, then they hope, some technology miracle will solve it, right? I think most of the time, the right way to solve it, deep, intimate understanding of the problem, then it's 80% of time that by doing that itself, you'll find a solution, right? So how do you deconstruct the problem is, to me, the first and foremost thing, my first principle on that. Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. Jay, a couple of closing questions that I like to ask all of our guests. Other than AI, looking ahead, what emerging technology or trend are you excited about for the future of supply chain?
I would say two of them. Actually, I'm super excited, right? The one is a computer vision, right? I'm really, I think it's a big, it's going to be pretty big, right? I mean, a vision, you could see, the computers, seeing through computer is not just a way to see it, it's also a way to responding to it, right? That's how humans we operate, right? You see it, you respond to it. So I think computer vision is going to be very powerful domain, and it's a lot of adoption already happening, right? If you walk to a lot of shop floors, it's being used in a quality control, sorting at warehouses. So many ways, even you go to the retail store, you see the robots are walking in the aisle, checking inventory, etc. That's very powerful. Then the second one, it's still a little bit of a nascent stage, but I think it's a groundbreaking is quantum computing, right? So I believe, a lot of optimization problems over past decade, they really, not anymore optimizers. They actually, people switch to most of the time what you call rule-based or heuristic, because it's very hard to understand optimization outcomes. So I think with the quantum computing, I think we will go back to true optimization, right? So I think that's going to be groundbreaking. A lot of complex, problems now you could solve through the quantum computing. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a background in, optimization myself, and very interesting. This is the first time anyone has given me that answer, but I'm definitely excited about it as well, right? Yeah, some problems that you simply cannot solve with today's compute are going to be maybe even you're very, very trivial in the next 5-10 years. I don't even know anymore.
Yeah, no, exactly. I'm super excited about quantum computing opportunity. It will revive the whole supply chain optimization. Yeah,
absolutely. Closing question for supply chain professionals, aiming to lead transformation. What skills or mindsets are non-negotiable? Maybe for earlier career professionals aspiring to, basically be like you. What are your recommendations there?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things I'll say. Stay curious, especially the technologies, the pace of technology and the whole world, right? The uncertainty. I think you really need to stay curious. But if you're a supply chain practitioner, right, sometimes you get stuck between, within the four walls of factory, distribution center, you don't see outside. I think what will really make a good supply chain is outside in, right? Understand your commercial partners, market dynamics, even if it got nothing to do with your job, today's job, right? But having that perspective will make you a better supply chain professional, right? I would also say really understanding, there is a big gap between knowing and doing, right? So you have to be self-aware of that. Those are the three, four things I would say important for a supply chain practitioner.
So stay curious, learn, what your commercial partners care about.
Outside in, yeah.
Outside in, and do more than
knowing and doing.
Knowing and
doing, because that will make you result oriented. Yeah.
Jay, you've been a fantastic guest. I really enjoyed the discussion, even including, Greek analogies, Cassandra and the Delphi Oracle. Thank you very much for being on today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's a great speaking with you. Yeah. Take care.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Bye.
That's a wrap on today's deep dive with supply chain optimizers. If you found value in our controversial tactics and data-driven stories, don't forget to hit follow and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Have a burning question or want to share your own optimization success? Connect with me, Diego Solorzano, on LinkedIn, or for more information on how we can help you transform your supply chain and logistics operations, visit thesteya.com. Thanks for listening.